Hi everyone, welcome to Festival Focus, episode 4 of 5. We're nearly there. We're getting towards the Cheltenham Festival. Exciting times. I'm Ben Linfoot. I'm joined by Brocklebank, Martin Dixon and Dave Massey, or the usual panel, as it's otherwise known, to discuss the Ryanair Chase and the Stayers Hurdle this week before we get into all sorts of horses that are on our radar, and we'll put a couple of bets up at the end as well, I'm sure. So guys, we're going to start with the Ryanair, and I think it's fair to say that back in the day, if it wasn't the Champion Hurdle or the Champion Chase or Gold Cup Day, then it felt a little bit underwhelming, but I don't feel that these days. Certainly last year when the Ryanair and the Stayers Hurdle came along, I thought it was one of the best days of the festival. So I love the Thursday. How do you feel about it, Matt?
Yeah, I'm with you. Again, looking back through the winners of the Ryanair Chase, as you say, it kind of was always considered kind of the weaker cousin of the big races. If you're not in the Champion Chase or the Gold Cup, you kind of go for the Ryanair Chase. But just look at the Roll of Honour in this race. It really is fantastic. We've seen some cracking winners. Obviously, one or two lesser additions along the way as well. But obviously, you know, Under So, Vautour, Imperial Commander, horses that have gone on and done it in Champion Chases and Gold Cups. And last year was another really dramatic and exciting race, wasn't it? So, yeah, the Ryanair Chase this time around has the potential, as we speak, to live up to being as good as ever, I'd say, as well. Real class horses in line for it. Hopefully we see the vast majority of them and we get sort of 3 or 4 of the big guns clashing.
And Dave Massey, with it being over the intermediate trip, it's often, if you can find a runner anti-post, you've done well in the Ryanair. But how do you approach it this year from a punting point of view? Because there's some big names in there, isn't there? And it's quite difficult to find an angle this far out.
Yeah, I think that sort of sums it up, really. I know we're going to look at the race in a bit of detail, but the more you look at the race, the more you're going, will that turn up? Will that turn up? Which ones, you know, and we could end up, for all that there's, you know, quite a few declared at the moment, we could end up with another. No, we're just about getting each way field, I think, out of it. It's looking more and more likely now that, from what they're saying, the sort of LA Francais is sort of tilting a bit this way now rather than Champion Chase. Which, in the one way, if they do go that way, at least we know we're absolutely guaranteed one thing, and that is a good pace in the race, which I think might bring one or two of the more lesser fancied runners into it. But we'll come to that in a bit.
Okay, Martin, how do you see the Ryanair picture at the minute? I mean, let's just try and identify a few of the ones that we do think are going to run in the race.
Yeah, I think it's starting to clear up a little bit. I mean, we know we're going to get Factor File. Spillane's Tower's always been targeted. That this was at least the likeliest destination for him. Hopefully he gets there. We know that Protectorat is likely to go here. Gaelic Warrior's still obviously up in the air a little bit. I think we probably expect him to go to the Champion Chase instead. But yeah, I think it'll be a decent sized field. It'll be very competitive. Obviously, at the front end of the market, we've got Factor File, who we've discussed in previous weeks, some very strong favourites that, in all honesty, have been, you know, there'll be punters out there taking them on, of course, in some of the other championship races. But I think they are the right favourites and they're very much the form horses. I think in the case of Factor File, we've got a favourite that maybe, yes, he's got very good form, he's consistent, and he's likely to have a really good chance in the race. But I'm not sure that he's so far ahead of his peers on the form book as the likes of a Constitution Hill is in the Champion Hurdle or Galloping des Champs is in the Gold Cup. Now he's not quite as short as they are, admittedly, but this is a race where I think I'd be keen to take on the favourite, just thinking that he's probably a little bit too short in what will be a very competitive race where you've got lots of similar calibre horses, really.
Yeah, we have. Let's talk about last year's winner, Matt, Protectorat, because we've seen repeat winners before in this race, haven't we? Alberta's Run and Allaho.
Yeah.
So, you know, we've seen it done before. And I was at Dan Scotland's Yard last week, and he says that he's in the form of his life and he's never had him as good as he is right now.
Hard to argue against it, isn't it? On the back of that really impressive win last time out. Just with the repeat winners in mind, I suppose you do see it, don't you, every season at Cheltenham, and it's not just the Cheltenham specialists and festival form repeating itself, but this intermediate distance on the chase course, it really does seem to be a bit of an acquired taste. I mean, seen it sort of time and time again in those big handicaps around the course throughout the season, and horses that have done it in Ryanair's as well, like Frodon, who obviously sort of bridged the gap between those big handicaps over the intermediate trip and the Ryanair. I mean, Il Ridoto, loads of horses that absolutely love it over this course and distance. Prominent racers too, and that's probably a major tick in Protectorat's box, despite there being a fair bit of heat on for the lead, I'd imagine, as Dave insinuated. Prominent races really do thrive in the Ryanair Chase. I think you're going all the way back to Balco de Flo in 2018 for the last winner who wasn't either right on the pace or sitting handily, and even he was, there was only like 5 or 6 runners that year, so he wasn't miles off the pace either. So yeah, I think you want to kind of get into a jumping rhythm. I think that's probably the bottom line. They tend to go hard and then they slow it down and then quicken up again after the water jump over there. And if you're not travelling by that point, I really do think you're in a bit of trouble in the Ryanair Chase. But Protectorat comes into it in fantastic form. He would obviously love rain. He seems to thrive on soft ground, and he thrives in a battle, doesn't he? I watched it again this morning, his win from last year, and not just a really good piece of form, but a great piece of evidence to show that this horse loves a battle. Envoy Allen came to tackle him, and he really saw him off on the run in that extra bit of stamina that you need to win the Ryanair. Kicked in late on, and if he goes back in the same vein of form, he'd have an outstanding chance again.
Yeah, 800 grand, over 800 grand he's won this horse. And Dan Scanlon was saying that, it's his will to win and his spirit that marks him out as different from a lot of the horses at his yard. Martin, you said you're keen to take on Factor File. Is Protectorat in your thinking?
Yeah, very much so. I do think he's overpriced in the anti-purse markets, to be honest. I can see him being well backed, and particularly if the rain does come in a couple of weeks' time and it ends up soft or heavy ground, which obviously we don't know yet what the conditions will be really. But I think he's around 7-1 sort of generally, maybe a bit shorter in a few places. But I think he'd be a very popular horse, come race time, particularly if it rained. And it seems to me that his season they've taken a sort of slow, softly approach to the season. And I felt like Windsor really last time was his first real target of the year. And he obviously passed that test with flying colours. Earlier on in the year, they started him out in the Paddy Power Gold Cup off a big weight, didn't ride him as positively as they usually do. And it was probably just a starting point really. And then he went to Huntingdon, which was the wrong way around. And again, they dropped him out. And again, it felt like they were kind of just working their way towards bigger things to come. But he fully delivered at Windsor. You couldn't knock that performance in any way. It was good on the clock, completely dominated. Jello's come out, who had beaten him before, and he's won, obviously, at Newbury in the Denman Chase. But Protectorat just completely outclassed them. And he does look as good as ever. And if he produces a performance like he did at Cheltenham last year, then I'd say that's right up there with Factor File's form, to be honest. And obviously you're getting a much bigger price.
Okay, Dave, let's just touch on that Jello form line, because obviously he beat Protectorat at Huntingdon and then was put in his place at Windsor. How do you see those two as a form line?
I think it's really interesting you've come to me to ask this, because I was at Windsor when the two of them were together, when the two of them ran, and my paddock. I'm not. This isn't after timing or anything. There were the notes that were sort of sent out before, and I said, look, I think Jello's had the edge took off of him after Huntingdon, whereas Protectorat looked absolutely spot on the day. He looked 100%. He looked ready to go. He was the one that was fit and well and shining in his coat. Whereas I just thought the edge had been taken off Jello a little bit. Now, you made the point then that Jello goes on and under a different type of ride wins at Newbury, and I think this is a key point now. I mean, if you look at Jello's Cheltenham performance last year against Grey Dawning, he was given a pretty aggressive ride that day, and he was still sort of bang there, turning in. But now we know that he can be dropped out as well, and under a sort of patient Charlie Deutsch ride, there's wonderful rides that Charlie gives where he knows exactly how fast a horse can go at any one time, and he did that at Newbury, and the horse still came through to win. Now, going back to what we were saying before now, if there's going to be some pace on in the race, I'm not suggesting for a minute Jello's going to be dropped right out the back. I don't think that's going to be the case. But I think if he's sort of ridden, now we know he can be ridden with a bit more restraint, I think he's quite interesting at a price here. I really do. The more I sort of look at him, and as you say, the form does tell you. I'm not going to put too much store in the Windsor result at this stage. I think we know Jello's better than that, and I think I wasn't at Newbury unfortunately when he ran, but I'd like to have seen him there compared to what he was like at Windsor. But I do think he's one that's quite interesting. He's on my radar for it. Yeah.
Just keeping on you for a second, Dave. You mentioned earlier that there might be one or two at bigger prices that could come onto the radar in this race. Is there anything you want to mention before we move on?
Yeah, there's just one more I want to mention. He probably won't go here. He's in everything but the Eurovision Song Contest, I think. Springwell Bay, who he's in so many races. It's very. I would say it's quite un-John Joe-like to have him in so many races at this stage. Normally they've got an idea. There might be one or two races where they want to go, and they'll be in both, or maybe three of them. He's in 6 different races, including this. Now, again, going back to what we're saying, if we're going to get a pace on here, I get the feeling that they think Springwell Bay is still better than what he's shown so far, and he absolutely dotted up last time at Cheltenham over this course and distance on the new course. So he's completely proven over the fences. He can get a bit toey beforehand. He can get a bit, can get a little bit keen. I'd like to see him no more than that, just nicely keen beforehand. But I think if he turned up here, I think he's an interesting outside. He's got to step forward again. Of course he has. He's got another probably £8 to £10 to find to even sort of get involved. But I get the feeling that they think they've got that in the locker. He's a really interesting one.
Yeah, one of the interesting horses with many multiple entries at the festival at Springwell Bay. Martin, anything else on the Ryanair before we move on?
I think we should mention Envoy Allen, who to me he's one of the interesting outsiders. I mean, he's as big as 25 to 1, 20s in a few places as well, and he's a horse that has been overlooked a few times in the past. Ahead of this race a couple of years ago when he won it, not many people fancied him. People felt like he'd not really gone on from what he was as a promising young horse, but his Cheltenham Festival record is outstanding, isn't it? Really, when you break it down, he obviously won here over hurdles in 2020. He won the Champion Bumper. He's won the Ryanair, and last year, when again he was overlooked by some, but he was actually sent off the 9 to 4 favourite for the race.
I was going to say, he was very well back last year, wasn't he? In the end?
He was really well back near, close to the off, and he went off 9 to 4 favourite. And in a race that wasn't a high tempo race, he travelled through it best of anything. He made a mistake, I think, at the final fence when he was starting to deliver a bit of a challenge to Protector at, and I'm not saying he would have beaten him with it. I still think he'd have been second, with or without the mistake, but it would have been a bit closer. And if the race is run at a stronger gallop, it'll suit him because he's often just sort of creeps his way into races. And it's not as if he was going to run below form at Kempton, admittedly, but he's done that before and bounced back. And the Down Royal win was, I know it was a very early point of the season. It was a small field, but it was a smooth performance from him, and a performance that suggested that he's still got the engine that he had last year and the year before. And he's like 20s and 25s and not talked about at all. And I feel like he will be primed to produce his best form again. And that best form has been good enough to get very, very competitive in last year's race and win the race the year before. So, I think he's been wrongly overlooked by the market at this moment in time, and be pretty sure that it's where he goes. And like we've touched on, if Ile Francais does run and Protectorat runs and it's maybe a bigger field again, it's likely to be run at a strong gallop, and that would play to his strengths.
Yeah. Matt, anything else you want to get off your chest for the Ryanair?
Well, I would double down on never rule out a Henry de Bromhead trained horse heading into the Cheltenham Festival, and I would repeat a little bit of what Martin said in that we've got an 11-year-old with a chance here from the de Bromhead yard, but I'm actually looking at Jungle Boogie. He's 11, but he's not a normal 11-year-old, is he? He's been very fragile, very lightly raced. He's only ever had 7 starts in his life. He's won 3 of his 5 starts over fences, and you could sort of argue that some of his form's a little bit flaky. That Tremor win on New Year's Day last year, 2024, and even kind of when he beat Classic Getaway, that was at Tremor. But go back and watch that Gold Cup. He absolutely cruised round. He jumped superbly. I'm absolutely convinced he wants to go left-handed, and that Gold Cup was the only ever time in his life he's ever raced around a left-handed circuit. I like him. He's made the comeback win earlier this season. That was at Ascot. It was a small graduation race. Obviously, he put his experience and relative age to good use. It was the race in which Iroko fell at the first, but he's 1 from 1 this season, and straight afterwards, Connections have sort of nominated the Ryanair Chase as his target. So I wouldn't be ruling him out either. He's not quite achieved the level of form that Il Francais or Protectorat or Factor File have yet. But he hasn't really had the opportunity. And when he raced in that Gold Cup, he just ran like a horse that didn't quite see it out. But go back and watch it. He's come in there 3 out, and he's in with a chance still at the second last. So I'd love to see him in a Ryanair. I hope they go this way. I think they've entered him in the Champion Chase and the Gold Cup. So it looks to me like the Ryanair is the obvious target to him. And I think he's another sneaky one for Ireland in here, Scoop. It's not all about the one horse at the top of the market, I don't think.
Okay, that's the Ryanair Chase. Could be a fantastic race if Factor File, Il Francais, etc. turn up. But let's move on to the Stayers Hurdle, the Paddy Power Stayers Hurdle, also on day 3, the Thursday at the festival. And the market here tells you one story, really. It's all about even money favourite Tehupu, and there's lots of other each-way chances, I guess you might call them, just in behind. But the key question is, are we for or against Tehupu at even money at the prices? Martin Dixon, you go first.
Yeah, I'll be against him at the price. It was obviously a good performance last season. He won it comfortably in the end, but I do have some sort of reservations as to how strong the race was last year. It might not be significantly stronger this time around, but we've only seen him once this season. You could make excuses for him getting beaten in a messy race, obviously by Lossiemouth, and it was by no means a poor effort from him over 2.5 miles. But I just think he's short enough really for a horse that I don't think he's one of the superstars. For all that he won the race readily last season, I think his level of form all round isn't so much higher than some of the others in the race. I think it could be a different type of race this year as well. We've got 30 entries for it at this moment in time. I think plenty will be willing to have a crack at it. It could be a big field. It could be a much stronger run race than what we got last year when they went actually quite steady. And I think that did suit Tehupu because, for a 3-miler, he has got a bit of pace, hasn't he? He's very effective at 2.5, particularly on very soft ground. He is a better horse, I think, when the ground's very soft, which we don't know that we're going to get those conditions at this moment in time. So things could be quite different to what they were 12 months ago. That's what I'm trying to get at. It might be drier ground conditions. It might be a bigger field and a higher tempo race, which would be a different test to what it was when he won it last year.
Okay, if we're taking on Tehupu, Matt, what's the problem?
Best horse in race, certainly on soft ground. He's going to be pretty hard to beat, isn't he? You look around, and Martin says, a big field. You do look around, there's a fair few rogues in here, aren't there? I mean, Bob Ollinger, Langadan, Asterion Forlonge, even kind of like horses like Garlaw. We're not quite sure where they're going to go, but some of those horses, you'd be rolling your eyes a bit, wouldn't you, if Bob Ollinger pops up or Langadan sprung back to form. So perhaps he hasn't got quite the tougher task as it might look on paper, but Mystical Power, he could be a springer here. I've no idea whether the intention is to run, but I wouldn't be shocked if he were closer to sort of 8-10 to 1 on the day if he runs. Some of his novice form has taken a bit of a knock, and obviously he's shown very little so far over 2 miles. He's bred to stay as far as you like. It's one of them, isn't it, where sometimes on the Thursday, Willie Mullins is, already 6-7 winners deep, and everything he runs gets absolutely hammered. I could see that horse attracting support. I'm not necessarily going to suggest he's a bet even at the kind of bigger prices, 25 to 1 now. But I have to mention the Wall Park. I think he's dead interesting here. Now, maybe they'll stick down the Pertemps route. Obviously, he's fully qualified for that, having won at Cheltenham earlier in the season. That was a race that worked out especially well. I think there were 5 subsequent winners to emerge from that. A couple of Grade 2 winners included Gowell Road and Beacon Edge, the other Elliott horse. Look, they ran him at Ascot just to find out, really, wasn't it? To find out whether he was good enough, whether he was a Grade 1 horse or not. And whilst he didn't win, for me, he showed enough that day. He really did. He was caught out a little bit by Beauport dictating, and he was out the back early on. But I loved the way he finished that day at Ascot Scoop. It really did scream Stayers Hurdle to me. It has all the hallmarks of a kind of strong finish in Cheltenham finish. We know he loves the course. This horse he's a bit of a winning machine, isn't he? Obviously, he started at a low level, and knowing the ability that he has now, he was fully entitled to do what he did in those handicaps. But he's 6 from 12 over hurdles. I reckon he could give his stablemate a real shock, no matter the ground, to be honest, but especially if it's a relatively dry week, Cheltenham week. So the Wall Park at double figure prices, non-runner, no bet, makes a good amount of appeal to me.
If not Gordon Elliott, go with Gordon Elliott then for Matt.
Right, so
Dave, how do you see Tehupu at evens?
He's one of those, isn't he? I don't particularly want to back him at evens, but neither do I want to get him stuck in and lay him at evens, to be perfectly honest. I think fair play to them for doing what they've done. I mean, after Fairy House, Gordon said, right, that's it, won't see him again till March, which is quite the right thing to do with him. He's best when fresh, and everybody moans that we never see these horses, blah, blah, blah. But if you've got a horse and you've got one shot at Grade 1 glory with him, you want everything spot on. There's too many, as the season goes on, get too many, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and then they change the plans, and by the time they got to Cheltenham, the horse is goosed, and it's not good enough. I think fair play to them, for putting him away after Fairy House. It's the right thing to do, is to keep him fresh. Martin made the point about, is this year's renewal similar to last year's? Is it better? Is it worse? I think it's... And then Matt makes the point about so many rogues in the race, and both are absolutely right. And it's with that if you're having an each way bet in the race, you're almost sort of waiting to sort of see who's there on the day, and it's going to be a case of who fancies it, for the places. Because these three, once you start, a lot of these been around the block, I took a look at Buddy One last night, and I thought, could that be maybe going back over hurdles, maybe he'll turn up having had a wind up. Is he going to be the one? Will that sort of get going? But these horses have been around a bit, and there comes a point when they just don't want to do it anymore. I think one horse that you can, if he turns up, and again, they were sort of, from what I gather, they were talking at the weights launch yesterday. They might not. But Gower Road is absolutely bang solid, and he will run his race. Now, that race won't be good enough to win it, but it might well be good enough to get him into the 3, into the 4, and you'll get an extra place on the day probably, because greedy bookmakers will want your money, as they always do.
Dave, sorry, do you reckon Lucky Place will stay? Because he's a solid, consistent horse as well, isn't he?
He is solid and he is consistent, but he's too short, Matt, isn't he? At the I think 8-1 for a horse that's got a narrow verdict over Gower Road, and Gower Road's 20. I don't see the difference in price between the two, and that was over a trip that's too short for Gower Road. So again, it doesn't make any sense to me that Lucky Place is about an 8-9 chance, and Gower Road is double that, because he's proven at 3 mile and he's tough as old boots. So if he turned up on the day, I think he'd be one I'd be sort of looking at as going, yeah, he's far more likely to run his race than a few of these. I did mention Buddy One. I think, the fourth last year was a decent run, and I'm not sure he got the best of right last year. That's my own personal opinion, but still, I'd be looking to go a bit wide running this time around. But he's, it's not really happened for him over fences, and he came back having made a noise last time. If he rocked up, having had a wind up and back over hurdles, who knows? I don't know. It's that sort of a race, isn't it? Tehupu, I think, form is the best. Even money is probably not far off being right. Are we going to get bigger than that on the day? Again, like we say, depending on the first 2 days, if we've had a load of short ones turned over, bookies would be wanting to get your money. You might get 6-4 on the day. You might get 6-4. So yeah. He's not an anti-post bet. And in terms of looking for something each way, for me, you've got to sit and I know this is splinters in the backside to the highest order, but you've got to just sit and wait, I think, and see what turns up.
Yeah, I think to be clear, I neither would I want to lay Tehupu, but I just think he's the price that he's the worthy favourite for the race. But there's a few different factors that come to play. Maybe when the final field comes about, and if it is soft ground and it's very similar to what it was last year, you might be very well be much more positive. There is a horse at a bigger price that I think is a lot better than his last run, and also ran in. I'd be pretty positive about the Wall Park as well, but I don't know whether they'll go here or run in the Potemps, so we'll just have to wait and see. But I think Hidden Valley Lake, who last ran disappointingly, obviously, in the Galmoy when he was a beaten favourite. But it was during that point of this year that we've touched on already where De Bromhead's horses just were not firing. And I think for that reason, you could be pretty forgiving of that run in the Galmoy. The run at Ascot in the long walk, I thought was a really good effort. And to me, him and the Wall Park were the two that deserved the most credit on the day and probably looked like the best horses in the race. Cranbow was well positioned, Burport was well positioned. They went steady, and it didn't suit Hidden Valley Lake really, but he was still only beaten ahead from a bit further back than the two that he split. And obviously the Wall Park was the fastest finisher. So I think those two emerged with quite a lot of credit out of the long walk. And although the form itself is a little bit shaky, I think if there is a higher tempo to this race, it would suit Hidden Valley Lake. And like I say, you can, in my mind, be pretty forgiving of the Galmoy, given the way the stables horses just weren't running well at the time.
Okay. Last word on the Stayers Hurdle. Dave Massey, you are the founding member and chairman of the Langadam fan club after his second Coral Cup success last year. How's he going to run?
I want to see some evidence he stays 3 mile first. That'll be my first question. Yeah. He's going to rock up. He's going to rock up in the Coral, isn't he, off top weight? You know what's going to happen. He's going to rock up. He'll turn up there. You watch. You just watch.
Okay.
I do. Listen, the Daffodils come out and Langadam comes back to form every year. God bless him. But I don't think this is the race for him, though.
Okay. That is the Paddy Power Stayers Hurdle. The market says it's all about Tehupu, but we shall see. Right then, gents, on the radar. Let's go with Martin first. What has come onto your attention this week, Martin? We've had the weights released. We've seen what the Irish horses are getting in the handicaps at Cheltenham, but you can tell me anything about any race at all.
Yeah, well, we're obviously a bit close to the meeting, really, aren't we, for anything hugely significant to be happening. We can obviously look back at the weekend. I suspect that from Kempton, Tripoli Flyer will probably take his chance in the Supreme, but I'd see him more of a horse that would be suited by a flatter track potentially. I think Aintree might suit him a little bit better. Having said that, he could also be better on a right-handed track like Kempton was, because he was just adjusting a little bit that way at some of his flights of hurdles. So left-hand track would be a concern. And as much as anything, I don't think that form from the Dovecote will be good enough to get anywhere near competitive in a Supreme Novice. The Pendle, we saw Rubo win that. That's not going to have much impact on the festival, obviously. So I don't think we're a bit too close to Cheltenham for any notable things to have happened in the last week. I think in relation to the races. In terms of the handicaps, obviously Kopek de Meers caught a bit of attention, hasn't he, with a mark of 135, I think it is, a complete unknown quantity. He'll be no doubt the talk of the town when it comes to all of the preview nights that'll be happening. But I think the look's set to go for the Martin Pipe with him in all likelihood. I believe that's the case anyway. So he's going to be a complete shot in the dark, and he might just be one of those that's like £20 well in. We really don't know on his French form. But I suppose he was the main talking point from the weights. There are a couple of others that wouldn't be necessarily notable after the weights as such, but just horses that I've got on the radar. For the Grand Annual, I was having a look through that after the weights had been released. There's a horse at a massive price of Lucinda Russell's called Trap Rain Law. I really like this horse. He's got a good attitude. He jumps well. He hasn't had the best season, admittedly, to this point, but I thought last time at Musselburgh was much more like it, and they rode him quite patiently, which hasn't been the case for his best performances, and it was over 2.5 miles. So I don't think the sort of reserve tactics over 2.5 miles is absolutely optimum for him. He's tended to be at his best around 2 miles when they've been more aggressive with him. But he just looked like a horse that was coming back into peak form, I thought, at Musselburgh. It was a good run to finish third in a pretty competitive race. He's slipped down to a mark of 136, which on his best form, I think is quite a lenient mark. Most of his racing, admittedly, has come in the north of England, but he's got some good time performances. He's run up against some good horses earlier on in the season at Carlisle when he finished third in listed company. So he does have some good form, and he's just a very likeable horse with a straightforward racing style. He jumps well, and I could see him being competitive in the Grand Annual, which is a race I think the Brits have won 7 of the last 10 So British trained horses have got a good record in the race. It's always, wide open. There'll be plenty with chances as they swing into the straight, but I could see him being one of them. And I think you can get as big as 50s in a place, 40s in a couple of places, generally maybe 33s. But he's a horse at a big price in the Grand Annual, Trap Rain Law, that I'd have on the radar.
Excellent stuff. Cheers, Martin. Matt, same question to you. What's bubbling away?
Yeah, I was a little bit more encouraged by some of the recent action, to be honest, Scoop. I will mention a couple of horses that ran in Irish horses. One ran in Ireland, one came over here. So on Sunday, we saw the final qualify for the Pertemps, and it was won by the very well-backed Will the Wise. Gavin Cromwell's got another one sort of added to the festival squad. He did have a hard race, though. He got up to beat Maxi Mac Gold in quite a tough race in attritional conditions. I was drawn to the third and the fourth. Gordon Elliott, his jockeys on the day, James Smith and Finn Brickley. I mean, 5-star rides by them. Full credit to them. Obviously, given the task of finishing inside the first four, and they finished third and fourth. Fantastic runs from them. Lucky Lyrian was the one I quite like the look of. He's obviously now qualified for the Pertemps final. Just last Friday as well, we saw Melina Girl. She came over, another Cromwell horse. She came over and ran at Exeter in the listed mares chase that she ran second in last year, and filled the runner-up spot again. And I thought she ran really well. It was good to see her back in form. She found the Polly Gundry mare, the thriving mare called Don't Rightly Know, found her a bit too good. But Gavin Sheehan rode her, and it was a nice tee-up ride, really. It was a perfectly respectable effort from Melina Girl. Now, she has had a very quiet season this time around as well. Didn't appear till New Year's Day. And that was on the back of, a long break after last year's really busy campaign, which included a Cheltenham victory and a handicap chase earlier in the season. That was at the November meeting. And then, obviously, if you remember her, when Connor Stone Walsh rode her, and she took a crunching fall, three fences from the finish when still travelling well. Her season was just, tailed off a little bit from that point, but it's good to see her back. I think she's got quite an attractive mark for the Ultima Handicap Chase. Interestingly, Cromwell had the third horse in the mares listed race just on Friday as well, La Malmaison, and if they reappear, if they both reoppose at Cheltenham in the Ultima, the second's going to be better off at the weights, and I think she's got 142. That should see her just slide in nicely towards the bottom of the handicap. So Melina Girl's got to be worth a second look, I think, in the Ultima. And then the final horse I mentioned, just again on the back of just seeing the weights in midweek, I do still need to go through these with a bit of a closer detail, Scoop. But the horse that I was desperate to sort of find out what his mark was Carafon. I think I mentioned him a couple of weeks ago. He's got entries in the Martin Pipe and the Coral Cup. It sounds like they're going to go for the Martin Pipe. That's the kind of early indications. I've spoke to Daryl Jake about this horse, a double green horse, Carafon, and he's hoping he might go for the Martin Pipe. And his mark is 135. So for a horse that, he was one of them, he was very lightly raced as a juvenile hurdler for Willie Mullins last year, finished fifth behind Carla Conti in his only start over Christmas last winter. And then this time around, he's come out and won his Clonmel Maiden really impressively over 2 miles, 3.5. So that was his first ever start for Willie Mullins over that sort of trip. And then they've dropped him back in distance to contest 2 Grade 1 races at Leopardstown. He's finished fourth to Romeo Coolio and seventh last time behind Kopek de Bord. And he's hopefully going to go back up in distance for the festival off a really attractive looking mark. So Carafon's got to be worth a look. Again, not massively missed in the betting, but I think he's around 14 or 16 to 1 for the Martin Pipe.
Okay. I know we've all had about 10 horses in the Martin Pipe, haven't we? But I've got another one. There was one that I was waiting for. And actually, this goes the other way because I'm a little bit disappointed with the mark he's been given. It's £7 higher than his Irish mark. It's Fleur in the Park for Andrew Slattery. Comes from that Limerick race. He's got loads of graded form. Thought it was dead interesting. Given a mark of 140 and he's 133 in Ireland. I mean, at least he's number 8 in the list and he's only got one entry. So
someone's been listening to the pod, Scoop.
I don't know. So yeah, but on the other hand, Sandor Clegane for Paul Nolan, gets in the Coral Cup off his Irish mark of 147. So no extra poundage from the BHA assessors for him. So he's suddenly come on the radar. Always dead interesting to see what the handicappers do with the Irish horses. Dave Massey, you've not been sighted on a racecourse since the handicap weights came out. I think you've been beavering away in the attic room, haven't you?
I think I've been ill. That's what I've been ill, Scoop. That's what I've been. I've been poorly.
I wondered when the excuses were coming out.
Look, Benelin, I'm poorly. I'll tell you what. We put all these horses up for the Martin Pipe, by the way. And we had a bet in the Martin Pipe in the pot. And we're no ordinary show, Martin.
Yes, we are.
We put horses up.
We've got 2 points. Haven't we?
In the From the Pot section, we've got 2 points with no ordinary show, and that's the only one that matters. Don't worry about
Brilliant. That. Correct. Why we spent 10 minutes talking about the Martin Pipe? Was not running no bet.
It was not on a no bet in case they go the Coral Cup now. Cutback to me looks like he's going to go for JP in that race.
Talking about 10 horses. Right, okay. I'll start you with Kempton. I will give a mention for one from a trackside perspective, and that was Mambo number 5, who was a different horse to what we saw at Cheltenham first time up. First time up at Cheltenham, from my word go when he came in the pre-parade, on his toes, didn't know what it was about, very green, very towy, far too keen, didn't run his race, and he was a different horse with the hood on Saturday. He was much calmer in the paddock, and I said before, I think he might. We'll see what he can do today, see if he can run his race, and he was just a different horse. And Ben Pauling afterwards admitted, he said perhaps I didn't have him fit enough either for Cheltenham, but the whole experience was just a bit too much for him. I think he's quite interesting for the Boodles now. We've seen a well-backed Ben Pauling one in recent times, haven't we? For the under different circumstances, but Bad was really well backed on the day or the day before, from sort of 16-1 into about 5. Now that's a different scenario. That was a horse with a French mark that was thought was too low, as it turned out. Bad just couldn't run his race anyway. But nevertheless, I think that was a big step forward for him. He needs another one, but he's, a marker 128 is not too punitive, I don't think, for Mambo number 5, and he's got some size about him. He's a big, robust thing, 17 hands, which was much to Matt Chapman's surprise. He thought he was quite a small horse in the interview afterwards until Ben told him he was 17 hands. But anyway, it's by the by. I think he's quite interesting. He'd be the one out of Kempton that, if there was any, I would take forward. How have I been looking at the handicappers? Funnily enough, tomorrow I'm going to be looking at all the sort of Irish handicappers and going through them. So yesterday I was sort of trying to sift through the British ones and see if there was anything there that was sort of moderately interesting. There were a couple of bits and pieces that came up. Unexpected Party for Dan Skelton is going to be £6 better off with Liberty Hunter for beating him in the Grand Annual last year if they go that way again. And they campaigned Unexpected Party really well, because he's actually pretty much run near his mark, apart from the old Roan when he didn't stay 2.5. But this year, because of the races he's been tried in, he's not actually run far below his mark. So it's not a case of him being sort of dropped out of the back and the marks come tumbling down. It just kept him ticking along, and his mark's still quite favourable, I think, for the Grand Annual. As I say, certainly favourable with the second. So I think he's quite interesting. And you might listen, Scoop, you might have noticed I'm quite old school, me. I'm quite old school.
We have noticed. Right. It's a lovable trait. Carry on.
It is. It's one of my lovable road traits, and I do believe I've always been a believer in previous festival handicap form being appointed to this year's previous or future previous festival handicap form. I think if you've run well in a handicap once, there's a fair chance you're going to come back and do it again. Now, having said that, the horse I'm going to put up ran well in a festival handicap 3 years ago. But he's only been seen a handful of times on a racecourse since, and that's Happy Go Lucky.
Oh.
No, it's not. No, Ordinary Joe. It's Happy Go Lucky, who I thought handicappers give him a chance. He's dropped in £3 for that comeback run at Cheltenham, which was over a trip too short. And I thought the engine was still there that day, and he went in the notebook as Ultima ? Sure enough, here he is. 140 is £7 lower than when he was second back in 2021, when he was still trained by Kim Bailey back then, now trained by Mel Rowley. And we know, listen, Mel's already won one Premier long-distance handicap this year. Why can't she do it again? I think for a horse that's 11, I think he's only had 13 starts. Very, very lightly campaigned. As I say, I thought the engine was there. The step back up in trip is definitely going to suit him. I think he's quite interesting at 33s.
He was off for a hell of a long time, wasn't he, before his Cheltenham run?
Best part of 3 years, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And what I like, Scoop, sorry, I should say as well, what I like is they've given him a little bit of time to get over that. They haven't rushed him straight back again to give him another run. They've given him time to get over that. So our old friend, the bounce factor, whether that exists or not, shouldn't come into play.
Okay. Excellent stuff. I just wanted to briefly chat with Matt about Whistle Stop Tar, because I know he's a horse that was on your radar, Matt, and I was chatting to you earlier about him, and I've got a ring round his name for the National Hunt Novices Chase. I just think he's a dour stayer, a mark of 136 for Lucinda Russell, but he's got loads of entries, hasn't he? That's what's putting me off.
He has. Yeah, he's got loads of entries, including one that isn't at Cheltenham at all, in the Midlands National. And I think at some stage, Lucinda mentioned another race at Uttoxeter as well that weekend. There's a 3 mile novices handicap chase, isn't there? So it's up in the air. He has got the entries. Interestingly, they did give him the 4th run, didn't they, on trials day? He ran behind Jaguar, finished 5th, back over 2.5 miles. It didn't suit him. So that 4th run actually qualifies him for the Ultima, the open handicap chases at Cheltenham, whereas for the novice ones, he was already in. So I'm with you. I think he wants a trip.
I do,
big time. And he's 40s and 50s for the National Hunt Chase, which is now the handicap, isn't it? 3 mile 6. So, if he were to rock up there, I couldn't put anyone off having a nibble at him at a huge price, non-runner, no bet, obviously. But I've no idea what the plan is at the moment.
No, neither do I, unfortunately. But he's definitely on my radar for something soon. So bear that in mind. Whistle, Stop, Tar. Yeah, I like him. Nice horse. Okay, we're going to finalise some selections now. I'll just go over the portfolio so far. This is from the pot, by the way, the final section of the podcast where we put some mythical points on horses. And we've spent 10 so far. 10 of the 20 have gone on Willie DeHoo for the Fred Winter, JPR 1 for the Queen Mother, non-runner no bet. No Ordinary Joe, as discussed, Martin Pipe, Golden Ace for the Champion Hurdle, Corbett's Cross, Each Way Thievery in the Gold Cup, and Isio Madrick in the cross country. What mark did he get, Matt?
Yeah, he got nudged up quite nicely on the back of that run in France. I think he got 100 and...
the French one, yeah.
I looked at it. He's going to be £7 out of the weights if the top one runs.
He's been nibbled at, though, hasn't he?
Yeah, I think he was. What was he? £12 out of the weights when he ran there at Cheltenham earlier in the season. So yeah,
it doesn't actually make any difference because he'll carry the same weight whatever he is out of the weights.
Still on 10-4, where it made no difference.
But the handicapping in the cross country is a bit of a joke anyway, isn't it? We've seen it time and time again. It's about how they take to it and
he's carrying bottom weights, Scoop.
Yeah, okay. Well, still interesting. And those are the 10 points that have been spent. So let's spend some more. I mean, it's the final week of the mini-series next week. It'd be nice to have a few left just because... So we can have something late doors. But fire away if you've got one. I mean, it sounded to me, Martin, like you're very tempted by Trapper-in-Law.
I mean, he would be the closest I would be. He's a massive price, obviously. I think, as I say, he's as big as 50s in a place, and he's a horse with a genuine handicapping chance on his best efforts, I think, and he's a huge price. So look, he'd have to go and prove him himself in a different type of race, obviously, than what he's done before. But he is a huge price. He'd be the closest I'd be. In some respects, I sort of think at this stage, you're better waiting another week and getting a little bit more information. And I don't feel like this is the optimum time to be playing Cheltenham markets, if I'm being honest.
I know what you mean. I feel very similar myself. But Matt, Dave, have you got anything for this section?
Well, on the back of today, the one I'd be most keen on is to back the Wallpark non-runner no bet 12-1, because even obviously it's no issue if he runs in the Pertemps final, and I'd be fairly keen on him to run there, to be honest. I think he's rated 152, isn't he, which is exactly what Cider Burley defined in his second Pertemps final as well. So they could be tempted to do that, but as we've sort of said, it's one of those races that could really it's a messy race, and the Walpart is such a progressive horse with a load of ones to his name. JP McManus, if the sun comes out, I think he could be. He's 12 now. He could be 5 or 6, couldn't he, on the day if he runs in the stayers?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's get him on side. Non-runner, no bet.
I'd go each way, even at that sort of price, just because of obviously the stablemate who completely dominates the betting. But he's obviously the horse to beat. But you want that element to the bet.
My gut feeling is he will go for the Potemps because Gordon's got such a strong hand with Tahupu. But obviously, if you're betting non-runner, no bet. It doesn't actually matter, and I would agree with you that if he does go there, I think he'll end up shorter. So, but I suspect he won't.
Has Jericho, one of the favourites, Jericho de Repenay, and there's another horse as well in the Potemps for McManus, whereas he hasn't.
There are
got nothing else.
Yeah. There are people out there who, when they get their money back, they feel like they're back to winner. So,
I am one of them. To be fair,
you're welcome.
Anything that comes back Cheltenham week. Yeah. Has JP got anything else for the stayers, Matt?
Well, does he not own half of Mystical Power? But
I've no idea. The Richie colours, though, isn't it? I think.
I've no idea what the plans are there, but
not sure it counts.
Yeah, I'd like to think that they'd like a dog in the fight.
Okay. 1 point each way, the Walpart, Paddy Power Stayers Hurdle, 12-1, non-runner, no bet each way. Dave Massey, do you want to add any points?
Only bet that I have of those that I've sort of mentioned is I have backed Happy Go Lucky each way at 40. I think this 33 is still around. I think that's probably fair enough because at least we know if he's turning up, he's only turning up in the Ultima. There's no other way, nowhere else he's going. So we know that. And he's got the potential to be a wise guy horse on the day, hasn't he? People will look and go, 140, that's a nice mark. And, if he gets a bit of rain, gets his conditions, he could be going off sort of near as 18, 20 to 1, I think. I don't think he's got the potential to absolutely collapse him, but he could be a wise guy horse on the day. I think the 40 was entirely fair. 33 is still fair enough. It'd only be a half point each way. I mean, given his age, you can't go mad on horses like that.
Okay. Well, we haven't had an Ultima bet yet. If you want to stick it in there.
Oh, go on. Let's have a go. Listen, as long as you save me 2 points for the. As long as you save me 2 points for the Fox Hunters next week, lad. You go mad next week. You go daft. It's fine.
Well, we can go mad next week because we've still got plenty to play with.
Yeah, I just to sum up this week of the races that we looked at, I thought Envoy Allen was very big for the Ryanair, but I'm not taking the jump on any of these to suggest they should be in the pot quite yet. I thought Hidden Valley Lake in the stayers had legs at again 20-25 to 1, and Trapper in Law in the Grand Annual. They're all huge prices, and I wouldn't be saying I'm all over any of them, but I could see cases for them at big prices.
Okay.
I think.
Well,
I was going to say we're so far out with the handicaps yet. There's a lot of guesswork involved in this. I know we've chatted away about him, and that's great, but there is still a lot of guesswork involved as to who's going where and why, and putting anti-post bets up. You've got to be backing non-runner no bet at the moment. Have to.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, we'll stick half a point each way on Happy Go Lucky.
Thank you.
33s for the Ultima Handicap Chase. 1 point each way on the Walpart. They're added to the From the Pot section, and we've got points to play with next week, so please do tune in. It's our last episode of this mini-series, Festival Focus Episode 5, and it's a free-for-all. We can talk about whatever we want, so I look forward to that, gents. Thanks to Martin, thanks to Dave, thanks to Matt, and thanks for listening. Hopefully you'll tune in again next week.